I'd returned from work to meet my family seated in the living room, alongside Ace, who was beside Betty. I was quite taken aback when my dad asked me to sit on the sofa, which wasn't taken. I obeyed, my heart racing. "Well, Greg, your sister and her boyfriend complained to me about being uncomfortable in the house with you around them." "Huh? Betty, do I bother you? I haven't even spoken to you both since you arrived."
Well, with you here, the house feels crowded.
Crowded? Yes, it's crowded. You have only 3 days to leave this house, Greg. That's all. Moreover, you don't contribute anything in this house except the peanuts you give us as rent, whereas Ace is rich and helps take care of us. I couldn't close my mouth. I stared at them, feeling a mixture of hurt, betrayal, and sadness. They just treated me like a piece of dirt, like a stranger. Quietly, I stood up and walked out of the living room. In my room, I called a close friend I'd met at the restaurant. I was ashamed, but I had no choice. I explained things to him and asked if he could accommodate me until I could get my apartment. Fortunately, he agreed. That night, I packed my things and walked out of the house. My name's Gregory, but everyone calls me Greg. I mean, it's shorter and better. One night, I had a fight with my parents. Not a fight, literally, and not words exchanged either. It was basically just them speaking down on me, and of course, me taking it. I'd just finished college. In fact, my graduation was only the week before. I was in the living room, eating from the box of pizza my mom ordered, when she walked in with my dad. Together, they'd gone out for a friend's daughter's marriage. I welcomed them, but got no reply. Instead, they lashed out on me. "The girl who got married today is only 3 years older than you. She's the same age as her husband, and he already has a car and a house of his own."
I heard the lovely man is also planning to get her mother a house.
That night, they spoke a lot, and I ended up going to the bed, hungry and angry. They only saw me as a loser and will always look down on me. I couldn't sleep, not with my parents' words continuously ringing in my head. I had to speed up my search for a job. I needed to save up quickly and leave their house, since it was clearly what they wanted. However, I was wrong about that. I did get a job, 1 week later, at a huge restaurant. The pay was great. I was sure I would move out to a great apartment in the next 6 months. I also hoped my parents would stop harassing me when I finally told them about the job. They were on a 2-week vacation in the neighboring town, so I couldn't tell them about my job until they returned. When I finally did, the reply I got was totally unexpected and insanely shocking. "Well, since you have a job now, living here won't be free anymore." I could barely even remember to breathe. I looked at him intently, hoping he was only joking, but their expressions showed that they were dead-ass serious. "No, this is insane. How can you ask your child to pay rent for living in your house?" "No, this is ridiculous. The only ridiculous thing here is you barking over something that wouldn't have happened if you were smart enough to get an office job, which would have paid you better."
The amount you'll be paying as rent is $500 monthly. If you don't agree with it, then you can simply get out of this house.
I didn't have anywhere to go, so I couldn't leave. My pay was $1,500 monthly. They're asking to be given a quarter of it. I also had to feed myself and also fund my transportation. Without a choice, I agreed. They made me sign an agreement to add $10 after 1 day of delay. I continued working at the restaurant. The first month ended, and I received my pay. I paid rent to my parents and divided the rest. By the time I'd assigned a duty to each part, I barely had anything to save. My heart sank. How was I going to get myself an apartment? I didn't want to continue paying such a ridiculous amount to my parents. I did save up a little money, and I continued to do so every month. By the 4th month, I'd gathered a quarter of what I imagined to gather in 2 months. It didn't matter though. I was making progress. I knew that in another 4 months, I'd have achieved my goal. My parents had stopped letting me eat their food, even on days when I was free. If my mom cooked, she would only prepare the quantity she and my dad could finish. That meant more money for me to spend. Luckily, the restaurant allowed me to eat there, so I only had to spend on food on my off days and some nights when I returned from work. Soon, we progressed to barely saying anything to each other. I mean, I was never able to have long conversations with them, but even the short ones had gotten shorter. It hurt me that they only remembered my existence only when it was time to pay rent, but I didn't dwell on it. I thought things were going smoothly until my sister Betty showed up with her rugged boyfriend, Ace. They'd both been dating for 2 years. It was surprising when my parents let her go live with him when she was only 18. I'd last seen her on the day of her 19th birthday. Her boyfriend had thrown a lavish party for her. At the time when she left to live with him, he was quite a rich boy. I wondered what job he did, but I couldn't ask. My parents said he was better than I could ever be, so I simply kept my question to myself. My sister and her boyfriend had moved in with us. No one told me anything. Well, until the next day. I'd returned from work to meet my family seated in the living room, alongside Ace, who was beside Betty. I was quite taken aback when my dad asked me to sit on the sofa, which wasn't taken. I obeyed, my heart racing. "Well, Greg, your sister and her boyfriend complained to me about being uncomfortable in the house with you around them." "Huh? Betty, do I bother you? I haven't even spoken to you both since you arrived."
Well, with you here, the house feels crowded.
Crowded? Yes, it's crowded. You have only 3 days to leave this house, Greg. That's all. Moreover, you don't contribute anything in this house except the peanuts you give us as rent, whereas Ace is rich and helps take care of us. I couldn't close my mouth. I stared at them, feeling a mixture of hurt, betrayal, and sadness. They just treated me like a piece of dirt, like a stranger. Quietly, I stood up and walked out of the living room. In my room, I called a close friend I'd met at the restaurant. I was ashamed, but I had no choice. I explained things to him and asked if he could accommodate me until I could get my apartment. Fortunately, he agreed. That night, I packed my things and walked out of the house. My family ignored me as I walked away, and that was when I felt hot tears rolling down my cheeks. I began living with my friend. Together, we went to work and returned home. I wanted to pay the rent with him, but he refused. According to him, he knew I was struggling and couldn't add to it. I thanked him so much. When that month ended, I suddenly got a call from my parents.
When are you sending your rent in? It's already 1 day late, so you need to include the $10.
I burst into laughter. Ha ha ha. Rent? Have you forgotten you all sent me out? I won't be paying a dime to you anymore. She flared up, telling me I needed to continue paying because my sister was living with them. I refused to pay, telling her to ask Ace to pay, since he was rich enough.
Ace lost all his money to an investment. He was going to better our lives if it had worked out. You need to help them, Greg. They can't afford to pay for it.
I thought about it deeply. I didn't want to pay for it. My mind went back to a job vacancy someone told me about 3 days ago. I'm not sorry about it, but I can't pay their rent. Instead, I can help them get jobs. I'll contact someone and refer them to him. That's the only thing I can do. Goodbye. The vacancy I had in mind had already been taken, but 2 came out from my workplace. A waiter and a waitress were needed. I told Betty and Ace about it, and they got the jobs. Fast forward to 2 months later, my family held a party to celebrate my grandmother's birthday. Well, surprisingly, they invited me. I took an excuse from work and attended. However, when everyone gathered at the big table, my parents began talking down on me.
So what does Greg do now?
Before I could answer, my mom did.
Well, he works at a shitty restaurant as a cleaner. He's my son, but he's really lazy. We had to force him to get this job.
Honestly, I've never heard of a more stupid son. He doesn't even send us money. If we didn't have Betty, we would have died of hunger.
Oh, Dad. I do the little I can, since my elder brother has refused to take responsibility as the elder.
I felt so embarrassed, hearing them sit there and talk so descending about me. It was even worse when my cousins chimed in and began talking bad about me for being lazy and not taking care of my parents. Shut the hell up, all of you. How dare you? I work as a chef in one of the most popular restaurants in this city. I earn more money than nearly all of you here. I could see the shock on their faces. I turned to my parents. I bet you've both gone mad. Tell them how you both took $500 from me as rent for living in your house. Tell them how I got jobs for Betty and this asshole as waiters in my workplace. Tell everyone. Y'all sit here and shit-talk me like I'm nobody. I'm better than you all hypocrites. You can enjoy the rest of this stupid celebration. Goodbye. I stormed out of the room and headed straight to my friend's house. Betty and Ace didn't come to work the next day. I immediately put up a vacancy post, and we got their replacements barely 2 hours later. After 2 days, they finally showed up. They confronted me about my actions, and I asked them to get out before I did something crazy. However, before I could speak more, Betty suddenly slapped me. "Are you crazy?" A punch landed on my face from Ace, sending me to the floor. He pounced on me and began punching me. The restaurant owner and a few customers intervened, pulling him off and sending them out. I apologized to the owner and pleaded with him for a day off. He immediately agreed and also advised me to report them to the police. I did. With the bruises I sustained still fresh, I headed to the police station, and Betty and her boyfriend got arrested. My parents called to beg me to release them, but I refused and charged them to court. They were both found guilty of assault. Even more, it was discovered that Ace was a fraud and not the investor he claimed to be. That added to his jail term. While Betty got 2 years, he got 10, both with hard labor. My parents rained vile words on me for sending their daughter to jail, but I didn't care. It was needed. My friend was generous enough to help me with some money, and I was able to get myself a comfortable apartment. After a month, my parents suddenly called me.
Greg, dear, can you move back in? We're badly in need of money, and your rent will go a long way in helping us. You know Ace and your sister had been the ones supporting us, and now they are in jail, so we need money, please.
I couldn't believe my ears. They'd lost every sense of shame in them. Wow. It's sad how you're both still so shameless, even until the end. I'll say this only once. I'm never coming back to that house, or even your lives. I do not want to have anything to do with you anymore. Consider yourselves parents of only a child who's in jail. If you ever try to contact me, I'll go as far as getting a restraining order on you both. Goodbye. I ended the call and even blocked their lines. They didn't know where I lived, so I was sure they wouldn't find me. I was going to focus on my life and make it better. A few months later, one evening while watching the news, I saw a picture of my father. Apparently, my parents had been so broke that they borrowed money from a loan shark and were unable to pay it back. This led to the gang kidnapping and torturing my dad. According to the news, the suspects were never caught. My mom had no choice but to sell their house to pay the debt to avoid any more kidnappings, leaving them very broke. When my dad was released, they ended up renting a tiny room with 2 other people who constantly drink and play loud music. I guess they are so depressed. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying I subscribed, and we will try our best to reply to your comment.